Hey everyone, and welcome back to STEM Girl Budgeting. If you're new here, I'm a 26-year-old woman who lives in a high cost of living city with my husband. We moved here because I am getting my PhD in a STEM field, and my husband works 100% remotely as a 1099 contractor at a tech company. And we have completely joint finances, and we budget together using this amazing software called You Need a Budget. My husband was actually the one who introduced me to this software 4 years ago. So he's been using it for 5 years. I've been using it for 4 years. And we combined finances a little over 3 years ago. And yeah, we just absolutely love this software. It's really gotten us through, a lot of things. And I'm going to go over some of those things with you today because I decided it would be fun to kind of go back in time and show you guys how we used to do our budget in the fall of 2022, which was kind of right after we started budgeting together, and we made a lot less income than we currently do. So I'll just flip over here. So this is like our current budget. We obviously have a lot more in assets. We organize things very differently, but 3 years ago, we budgeted like this. So we had our monthly bills, our debt payments, donations, frequent expenses, non-monthly subscriptions, true expenses, which are kind of like sinking funds, things that you want to save for month to month so that when they come up, even though it's a non-monthly expense, you have the money set aside for them. We had quality of life where we just both got individual spending money, and then our goals. So where did I get this number? So I actually went back to kind of our old like income records to pull what this number was back in August 2022. So in August 2022, I made an income of $2,427.75. I was working full time as a research assistant at a university while I was preparing to apply to graduate school. And I think I made $18 an hour. And then my husband actually made a similar amount per hour, maybe like 16 per hour, but he was only part-time because he was still finishing his last year of college. He was a year behind me in school. We're the same age, but he just yeah, our like school situation kind of got like offset a little bit, but yeah. Anyway, so he made a part-time income. This was actually a little bit higher than what he made most months. I think he usually made more like 700 or 800, and I'm going to go ahead and show you guys that in a little bit. And then we did use credit cards for cash back, although we didn't really have it very optimized, and we usually only got like 1% like cash back on all of our purchases because we hadn't gotten a lot of the credit cards that we now use. But anyway, so I am going to show you guys how we budgeted back then and how we were able to live and save for our goals on an average income of around $3,300 a month. And this month it was a little bit more than that. But yeah, I'm gonna go through that. But first, I thought it would be interesting, and feel free to skip this part of the video if you're not interested. I'll put timestamps so that you guys can just skip ahead straight to my budgeting. But I thought it would be fun to kind of go over, where our income has kind of gone over the years and kind of what we were prioritizing and why. So basically, we started combining finances sometime in 2022, and I just decided for the sake of this video to start showing you guys our income in June 2022. This was when, so I was already graduated from college, so I was working full time. My husband was on summer break. I think he was maybe taking like 3 credits like over the summer or something like that. But for the most part, he was working full time, and we were able to make on average like $4,800. But then he went back to school. So during this time, he was in school and I was working full time. We lived on an average income of around $3,339.92. And we completed a big goal of paying off my husband's car loan. I guess I'll flip back because I actually updated all these accounts to be exactly the way that they were back in August of 2022. So we did have cash set aside for, various things. We've always prioritized being a month ahead in YNAB. So I guess I should have explained what You Need a Budget is, but it's basically like a digital envelope budgeting app. And so you budget with money that you receive. And so then when you're spending money, it's not like you're actually spending money you really have. And if you choose to overspend in a certain category, then you realize, like, oh, I have to take some of my money from a different category in order to compensate for that. And so it really, really helps you kind of think very carefully about like how you want to use your money, and then to use your money the way that you want to use it, or the way that you should be using it. So that's why we love it. But anyway, so back in August of 2022, my husband still had a car loan of a little over $3,000. He got his car for like $10,000, and then had been kind of working to pay it off during school when he could. And then he did have a small student loan as well from one of the semesters where he just needed some extra money. So he had this debt. We had very little in investments. My husband hadn't really been contributing to his Roth IRA at all. He made a one-time contribution when he was like 18 years old and then never contributed again. I also had a 401a through the university that I was working for, but I wasn't contributing to this. My employer was contributing to this. So they did direct contributions. It wasn't a match or anything, so I didn't have to put anything in to get it. But it was really nice because since I was only making like $37,000 a year, my effective compensation was actually a bit higher than that, since they were making regular retirement contributions on my behalf. And I'm really glad that, I was able to work for a year before graduate school so that I did have, a little bit of a jump start on my retirement. Before, committing to another several years of school as a PhD student. So anyway, that's the context there. So we ended up paying off the car loan in September of 2022. Then my husband was in school, and this is also when I was applying to graduate school and like flying all over to like interview and decide like where I was gonna go. And then I decided to leave my job at the beginning, I think middle of May, and we decided to go on a trip to Europe to kind of celebrate my husband finishing school, and then also me, getting into a really great graduate school. So we decided to go to Europe, and we actually did this trip very, very cheap because we were able to fly to Vienna for $600 each. So we only spent like $1,200 on our flights. We started getting a little bit into credit card points, and we were able to use those points for all of our lodging throughout the trip. And then we also only spent $800 on food, transportation, and activities while we were there, which is obviously insanely low, but we wanted it to be cheap. I mean, Central Europe can kind of be as cheap as you want it to be. We just didn't really do any fine dining, and neither of us are very like into drinking either. And so we were able to kind of keep costs super, super low and still have a really great trip. And we saw a lot of fun things. We did it with a couple of family members. Some of our siblings also went, and it was just a really fun trip. So anyway, and then I decided to stop working, and we lived with my parents for the summer while I kind of prepped things for the move and figured out like how we were going to do it. And I also thought it would be nice to take a little bit of a 2-month break before having to kind of lock into being a PhD student for the next, 6 years or so. So anyway, but then my husband was working full time, and he got a job paying, it was I think $27.50 an hour. He was paid weekly. And then he kept that job also when we moved out to where I'm currently going to graduate school. And then I eventually started getting paid for being a PhD student. So then we were both working full time in a high cost of living city, averaging about $7,500 a month. And within the first few months that we lived in the city, we really prioritized finishing our emergency fund, which for us, we decided a good amount was $12,000, which would have been 3 months of living expenses at about $4,000 a month. And then we didn't really start seriously investing for retirement until like February of 2024. But we also decided to pay off my husband's student loan just so we would be done with it. And then we really started like investing. I think we invested like maybe 18% of our income or so. And then my husband just recently got a new job. And now he makes twice as much as he made before. He's a contractor and he makes a flat $10,000 a month. And so then we set aside $2,600 for taxes, and then because he's considered self-employed, he doesn't have an employer like technically, and so we have to cover his health insurance and do his retirement ourselves, but we're able to do that with pre-tax dollars to kind of decrease his taxable income, which is why his taxes are only 26% even though he's self-employed. So anyway, but yeah. If you're interested in kind of how we budget currently on a much higher income, feel free to watch my previous video. I will link it in the description. I also wanted to talk about one other thing. So I am going to show you guys how we budgeted in this period where we were making on average $3,300, and specifically August of 2022 when we made this income. But what were our goals like during this time? So I'm going to show you how expensive it was to move to a new city. So I was applying to graduate school. We had to save for application fees, and we also knew that we would be moving out of state because we didn't want to stay in the state that we currently were in. And so when I ended up deciding where to go to graduate school, we found out it would be incredibly expensive to move. And we moved to a city that requires you to prepay both first and last month's rent, plus have some sort of security deposit, plus you have to pay a broker's fee, which is equivalent to 1 month of rent. So just that right here, plus like this key deposit, was $7,100 that we needed just to get an apartment, to get a pretty low-cost apartment in, the area that we were moving to. And we live a little bit further than I would like from where like I go to school and like work in my lab, but it's worth it because our rent is just not very expensive. It started off at like $2,000 a month, and now we're paying $2,175 a month, and it's for a 1-bedroom, 600 square foot apartment. But yeah, back when we were only making, $3,300 a month, it was very stressful to think about moving to a city that required us to put up $7,000 just to get an apartment. Not to, and then when you consider like all of our other moving expenses, which came out to like $4,300, it was a lot. It was a lot of money. And so obviously like this prepaid first and last month's rent was $4,000, but that was going towards like our actual living expenses. We were just prepaying them. And then this is refundable. But over $6,300 was non-refundable, non-living expenses that we had to spend for this move. And in total, the summer, right as we were moving, so this time, we had to spend over $11,475 to move. So it was crazy. Plus we decided to go on this trip to Europe. So we really had to live pretty frugally in order to make this happen. We did not go into debt for this trip. We received no assistance from family to help us. We were on our own. And the only assistance that I guess we got is that my parents let us live with them for those couple of months. And so even though I wasn't working, we weren't paying for rent. And also my parents bought a lot of groceries for us. Like we bought some groceries, but we kind of just lived off of them. And so it allowed us to save money and allowed me to take a break. So very grateful for that. I do want to just say though, and I probably should have already said this, that we did receive some bonus income during this time. And I just want to share this for like full transparency because there's no way that we would have been able to pay for this move and pay off our car loan without additional income. It just like wouldn't have happened. So this one isn't additional income. This was just a tax refund. So we like we overpaid our taxes, and so we got a refund, and we just put that straight into moving expenses. And then my husband was still in school, and he received a Pell Grant for the fall semester and then the spring semester. And that helped us a lot as well. Both be able to be in a position where we could pay off like the car and feel comfortable doing that, and then also help us feel comfortable being able to pay for this move. And my husband received Pell Grants all throughout college. His parents are very low income, so he was on, I always mix it up whether or not it's Medicare or Medicaid for, I know one's for like retirees, for like older people, and one's not. But anyway, his family was quite low income, and so he always qualified for Pell Grants. And that ended up being a huge help during this time. So I guess that's kind of our income progression slash financial journey over time. It really took us a while to start to feel financially secure. I feel like we started feeling much better once we had our emergency fund and we paid off, all of our debt, and we started seriously investing. And then we were stressed a lot as my husband was looking for a new job because his original job ended after 2 years. It was a temporary position, his first job out of college. And so we're very fortunate that he was able to find a new job, and we also laid a really strong financial foundation over this period of time. So anyway, that's kind of the context for all of our finances. But now I'm going to show you how we budgeted back in the fall of 2022. Let's hop right over here. So how did we use to budget our incomes? We lived in an apartment. It was a 1-bedroom apartment that we rented, and we just paid a flat rate. We didn't have to specifically pay for utilities because we actually lived with our landlord in like a basement apartment, and so there was no way that they could have monitored like how much we were using utilities versus them. So we ended up just paying a flat like $1,300 a month to them so that we could live in their basement. And we actually kind of regret living here a little bit because we lived really far away from both where my husband went to school and from where I worked. And we kind of wish that we had just lived closer to one of those locations and then have only one person have a really long commute. And my husband, looking back, says like he would have been fine to live close to where I worked, and he could have just taken a train down to like where he went to school. And it would have been a long commute, but he had like homework and stuff, and he could have just done that. And anyway, so this was kind of a rough time in our lives, but $1,300 was really all we could afford. I mean, we were only making $3,300 a month on average. And let me pull up a calculator. So 1,300 divided by 3,300 on average. Yeah, so we were spending like 40% of our income on just rent alone, so things were tight. Things were definitely tight. And then both of our parents graciously paid for our main like phone lines, like plans. So we just stayed on our family plans, and our parents covered that because they knew that we were not in like the best financial situation. Obviously, we like had money. But they knew that we were getting ready for like a huge life transition in like a year from then. And so my husband just had to pay for, he was like paying off a phone that he had gotten, but that was our only phone bill. And then my husband's student loan was in forbearance at the time, and once it stopped being in forbearance, it was only $60 a month, but then we ended up paying it off early anyway, just because we didn't want to have another fixed expense that we had to worry about, which is kind of annoying. But we did have an auto loan, and we did end up paying this off early, but the auto loan was $172 a month that we were responsible for, and it was a pretty high interest loan, which is why we decided to pay it off early. I think it was like 9.2%. So as soon as we were able to pay that off, we just took care of it. And then for our frequent expenses, which was kind of, the bulk of everything else, we somehow managed to only spend $250 on groceries. And we supplemented, our eating our food with takeout. So this was not like fancy dining out. This was like we went to Wendy's or Taco Bell or Chick-fil-A or something. And yeah, we did not eat super healthy because we didn't want to spend very much on food. And it honestly was more expensive to get really nice food at grocery stores at the time because we didn't really know how to shop. And our grocery store was just like super expensive. That was near our house, or near our apartment. So it was just, yeah, it was kind of tough. But we managed on about $550 total for food. And then transportation, I told you guys we both had a really long commute. And also, I remember gas prices were just insane during this time. It was absolutely insane. It was, over $4 a gallon. And I was driving like 45 minutes to work, and then my husband was driving like 30 plus minutes to school. So it was crazy. Yeah, we spent a lot of money. And then household items, this is like laundry detergent, soap, baggies, that kind of thing. So $20 to that. And then we tried to give ourselves about $50 a month so that we could buy clothes for both of us if we needed it. And then $30 for haircuts. And then we didn't necessarily contribute to education unless my husband like needed to buy a book or something. But we also used this category when we had to pay some of his like summer tuition. And then gifts, we usually just left it. And then if we spent from this category, we would just replenish it with our next paychecks. And then we did have a few subscriptions like Google One, Costco membership, YNAB, and then LastPass and iCloud. I think some of these targets were a little bit weird at the time because like we were like rushing to get like a Costco membership, and then we like combined our budgets, and so I had saved for like my YNAB subscription and my husband had saved for his, and then once we combined we didn't need to contribute as much as we used to. Anyway, so some of these numbers are weird, but in general we spent like about $20 a month on subscriptions. And then for our true expenses, so our non-monthly expenses, we tried to put $35 towards medical. Our car insurance was so cheap. It was full coverage, but we used to not like max out our liability as much. We got like, it was like 100,000, 300,000, and then like 100,000 like personal property damage or something. Anyway, so it was also just way cheaper where we used to live to insure our car. It's like pretty insane. But yeah, we paid $60 a month for that. And then registration, it was like same deal. We needed to register our car and we were like rushing to fund this. So that's why it's like so much money assigned. And then we used to only put $20 towards car repairs and maintenance because we just like didn't have a lot of money to put much more towards it and to be able to save up for all the other things that we were saving up for. But like that's what we could do. And I feel like just even putting a little bit can just like really help at least take care of like oil changes and like minimal work that needs to be done. And then home maintenance, I have no idea what this category was actually for. Maybe I should look back and see what we spent on home maintenance. Like, I don't even know. I might have just deleted this category at some point because we never used it. I have no idea why I had this category because we were renters. So if we ever needed anything done, then our landlords would have just taken care of it. So I don't know about that one. And then $20 for technology. I'm not exactly sure. Oh, this was just because I believed that it was good to set aside money every single month in case one of us needed to replace our phones, repair screen, or get a new laptop. But obviously $20 a month isn't going to make a huge difference, but I think just having a little bit of money in each category can really help soften the blow when an unexpected expense comes up. So I am a big believer in putting at least something towards your goals if it's like something that's needed. I don't believe in putting something towards a lot of different want goals because then it just feels like it's going to take forever to reach any of those goals. But in general, I think it is good to, put something towards all of these types of things, which are necessary life expenses. And then for our like personal spending money, we both at the time only got $50 a month. I think we even reduced this at some point to $25 a month because we just needed more money to cash flow our other goals. I mean, we were saving money to go on that trip to Europe. And we were, prepping for a big move and also saving for my application fee so I could actually apply to graduate school. I was able to get fee waivers for a lot of my applications, but not all of them. So we did have to pay a good like $600 or $700 for my applications, even with like the fee waivers that I got, which is crazy. So yeah, at the time, I think I was trying to save $1,000 so that I could have money for grad school apps. And then I started talking to the different schools I wanted to apply to and trying to get fee waivers just because, we were like lower income and didn't have parent support. So anyway, so to make that happen, we were saving for that. And then for moving, we tried to put every amount that we could towards the moving fund. Obviously, what ended up really helping was our tax refund the following April. That helped a lot. And the fact that we got Pell Grants over the year also allowed us to have enough money to be able to move. I also think we drained our emergency fund a bit in order to make it happen, but you have to do what you have to do. I mean, it takes a while to build up a good, solid financial foundation, and it feels like it's going to take forever. And I feel like for us, we were very fortunate that we weren't drowning in like student loans. We both had scholarships to go to school, and so we didn't have ridiculous debt. I didn't have a car. I didn't own a car. My parents let me use a really, really old car of theirs. It was like a 2004 Toyota RAV4, and it was a car that all of my siblings had driven like in high school, and they let me keep it for this 1 year so that I could commute to work, and that was extremely helpful. And then my husband also didn't receive any help at school, but he received a full tuition scholarship. We both worked full time, but still money felt super stressful for a few years while we were laying our foundation, while we were prepping for this move, and then having to get established in a high cost of living city and away from family, and just get used to paying for a lot of different things that you have to pay for, like as an adult. And so it took years, and we worked very, very hard to get into as good of a financial situation as quickly as possible by choosing to rent in a place that was not super expensive, and then saving as much as we could from our income by not like letting ourselves get out of hand with like spending. And I'm really, really grateful for that because particularly for my husband, I think from growing up, he has a lot of money anxiety, and this budgeting software helped him a lot with it. But I am definitely the one who's a little bit more involved in the details of our budget. He uses our budget regularly, updates it, that kind of thing. But I kind of decide more like, okay, what should our targets be? What should our big goals be? How should we invest? Which account should we invest in? Like, I kind of deal with that side of things. But for my husband, putting in this work was just so worth it, just to see my husband feel so incredibly relaxed and happy, because I think his whole life he was just so stressed about money. Coming from a household where his dad just constantly didn't have a job, and like he had all of these siblings, and they just couldn't afford to, have like a lot of things that, like, I'm very grateful because my family was much more like middle class. And although we lived in a high cost of living city or high cost of living area, I guess, growing up, my dad still made a decent income. And even though he couldn't help us with like college, I still feel like we had everything that we needed and wanted kind of growing up. And so it was really important to both of us to have a lot of security in our futures and to spend the time to lay this foundation while we were young. And I'm just so grateful that we've made so many sacrifices in our early 20s and leading into our mid 20s so that we just don't feel stressed about money. It is so worth it. It is so worth paying off whatever debt you have. I mean, for us, obviously, it wasn't that much at this time. It was over $5,000, but that was a lot for us. $5,000 was a lot for us. And spending over $11,000 on a move to a new city, really far away from both of our families, that was so, so expensive and so, so stressful. But like we did it and we did it together, and we were able to save for our emergency fund afterwards. And we've been able to start investing, and good things have just continued to come as my husband was able to get a new job and double his income. And I'm just so, so grateful that we have used this budgeting app to clearly prioritize where we want our money to go and to make, to just reach our goals. So anyway, that was a really long tangent. Let me finish budgeting this paycheck. But basically, all of our extra money did kind of go towards our vacation. So because we did want to take a trip before I went to grad school, we were putting money aside so that we could afford to get our flights and any other things that we needed to book early. So, yeah. Anyway, sorry I monologued a lot. I have a habit of doing that, but I hope that this was interesting. Obviously, this is a very different situation to our budget now, which I talked about before, where we now pay $2,175 in rent. We have a lot more little expenses that we have to make sure that we pay for. But yeah, if you're interested in seeing how I budget, how we spend our money, our goals, our income updates, our net worth updates, please subscribe to this channel, and please leave any comments if you have questions. So yeah, thanks so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.